Hello, greetings from Colorado Springs. My name is Lance Kohler. I'm the managing broker of the Cornerstone Real Estate Team. Today I'd like to talk to you about establishing a maintenance budget for your rental property and budgeting for your business. So we've talked about before how you should view your investment property or properties, or your rental property or properties, as a business and take that perspective. And so we want to talk about how to establish a maintenance budget for your business of managing rental properties. And I'm going to talk about a couple categories. The first category I'm going to talk about is general maintenance and capital expenditures. So across Colorado Springs, and we've polled several other property management companies, we see expenses for general maintenance and capital expenditures of anywhere 5% to 15% of rent income, and that's generally across Colorado Springs. So that fits what we see in our company, and like I said, we combined data from several other property management companies to come up with those figures, and that is taking into account multifamily properties and single-family homes or single-family home management. So that's one method, and that varies, and that's a pretty wide variance, 5% to 15%. It varies on the condition of the property and the age of the property. And so that's taken into account homes that are a couple years, 5 years old, so relatively new homes that are rental properties, and multifamily properties that were built in the late 70s or maybe even the early 70s. So quite a variance, I understand that. So you got to take that into account with the age and condition of the property. Another method, other ways that I've seen people do it, is they set aside 1% of the home value. So if your home is worth $200,000, you set aside $2,000. That's your maintenance fund. Another method is $1 per square foot annually. So your 3,200 square foot home, you set aside $3,200 into your maintenance fund. Back to the 5 to 15%, our sales agents that work with investors typically use 8.5%, and that's what they use when they're calculating returns on an investment property. They're going to use 8.5% that they want to set aside into a general maintenance reserve or reserve for general maintenance capital expenditures. And then if the property is relatively new and in very good condition, they may go down a little bit from that, reduce it a bit. And if it's older property or it's not in good condition, then they'll raise that a little bit. So that fits right into our 5 to 15%. And as I said, dependent on age and condition, and also dependent on climate. So depending on where you are, you may have to set aside more or maybe less funds depending on where you're at. In climate, or in Colorado, we're in a very dry climate, unlike if you were in Georgia or Alabama, where you have a very moist, humid climate. So you have different maintenance issues, or potentially different maintenance issues there in the southeast than you do out here in the west. We would have to worry more about exterior painting, perhaps, and staining of decks, and damage from hailstorms or windstorms. And in the southeast, you may be more worried about mold or mildew damage, making sure everything's ventilated, those sort of things. Also encourage you to set aside an emergency fund for unforeseen expenses. You don't know what's going to happen. It's an unforeseen expense, unforeseen event. Have some funds set aside to take care of that. And thirdly, here you see insurance, and it doesn't really fit into setting aside funds or including that in your budget. I just want to make sure that you have it and that it covers the types of conditions you may have at your property. Again, I mentioned, I used Southeast Georgia, Alabama as an example. A lot of moisture there, so you may need mold insurance, or you may need termite insurance if those are prevalent in your community where your rental property is. Here in Colorado, we want to make sure that your insurance, one, it's covering your property as a rental property, but that you've got adequate hail insurance, because we've seen hailstorms here that have caused tens of thousands of dollars of damage to a single property. Skylights, roofs, gutters, siding, decks, etc. We had a windstorm here a couple years ago that caused quite a bit of damage, blew down fences, took parts of fences and blew them into properties, damaging windows and siding, etc. So not that you have to budget for that, I just want to make sure that you've got insurance and that it covers your rental property for the conditions or the potential damages that you may have depending on where that property is located. I also wanted to discuss, since we're talking about maintenance, preventative or periodic maintenance, because we've heard the saying, a stitch in time saves nine. It's always good to keep up with periodic maintenance while your property is under tenancy, because that $1 you spend now may save you $100 in the long run for something that wasn't taken care of. Things like cleaning gutters. So we have, again, location dependent, but we have some properties here in Colorado Springs where there are no trees that are higher than the first floor of the building. So there are no leaves that are pine needles or anything that gets in the gutters. We have other properties in more older developed areas of Colorado Springs where we have to clean the gutters every year. If you don't clean those gutters, then you're looking at potential water damage, damage to the gutters, damage maybe to the roofing or to the flashing underneath it, damage to the siding, or it leaks inside the home, damage to your foundation if it's not being taken away from the property correctly. So cleaning your gutters. Sprinkler system's another one. You want to have those winterized in the fall and have them started up in the spring, maintained in the summer. Furnace inspection and cleaning. So two items there. One is an inspection just to make sure the furnace is working right and that it's not leaking any natural gas. So most of our furnaces and hot water heaters in Colorado Springs, most, not all, but most, are run off of natural gas. So you can have that inspected and have it cleaned. And the purpose of having that furnace cleaned, even though you're using a filter and changing that filter on a regular basis, is you're extending the life of that furnace. And so by keeping it clean and keeping it well maintained, you're going to get the most use out of that furnace. And while that vendor is in there checking on your furnace and inspecting it, making sure there's no natural gas leaks, they can also do the same for your hot water heater. And that way you can rest assured that there's no gas leaking into your rental property. Another example of periodic maintenance is caulking tubs and showers. Make sure there's no water leaking into the wall or into the floor, into the ceiling in the room down below, causing water damage. And again, I've mentioned already, in Colorado, we've got to watch the exterior painting because the sun's just so hard on painted surfaces, wood surfaces that are outdoors. So your exterior, home exterior, and decks need periodic maintenance, maybe more so than they would need if you were in the Northeast or somewhere else, for example. And lastly, I wanted to go over a way to set up a budget for your rental property. And I'll kind of walk through this, the first couple examples. But we talked on the first slide about a way to just calculate a maintenance budget and set those funds aside. You can use 5 to 15%, somewhere in there. You can use past data, obviously. You can set aside $1 for every square foot or 1% of the home value. Or you can set this up based on your particular rental property. And so what I did is I listed some capital expenditure items down the left-hand side under item, and we'll look at the hot water heater. So hot water heater, life expectancy is 10 years. So anywhere from 6 to 12 typically nowadays, but we'll say 10. So life expectancy of that hot water heater is 10 years, and in your property it's 5 years old. It costs $1,000 to replace it. Actually a little bit more here in Colorado Springs right now, but we'll use $1,000 to make the math easy for me on the slide. And so that means you're going to reserve funds, $200 for the next 5 years, $200 each year for the next 5 years, and you will have that money when it comes time to replace that hot water heater. You've already got those funds set aside. Second example I used was HVAC. We're going to get that life expectancy of 20 years. It's currently 10 years old. And it's going to cost us $3,000 to replace it. And so you're going to set aside $300 per year for the next 10 years, and you'll have those funds already set aside in your emergency fund or reserve or whatever account you want to name it in your maintenance budget, so that you're not taking those items out of pocket, or you're not getting caught not having funds available when the time comes to replace those items. And I just listed flooring, cabinets, paints, some other items you can put on there, upgrades or improvements. That's just an example of how you can really build a specific budget for maintenance for your rental property. Thank you for your time. I hope this was of value to you. I appreciate you watching our videos, and please feel free to give us any feedback on our website. If you want to know what your property would bring in for rent income, you can check out our free market analysis on our website. Thanks again. Have a great day.